Hey guys, I'm John. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to read The Value of Freedom. It's a document that the Alberta Prosperity Project has published on their website in favor of Alberta independence. In a previous video, I made a comment about how you should only talk about things that you actually understand. And I was kind of discouraged by this because I thought, I don't understand all of these complex, economics arguments, but I'm like, you know what? I can also read. And so I'm going to read this Value of Freedom document, and I'm going to filter it through my mind and see what comes out. And this is partly to prepare myself better for public conversations that I have. When I'm walking around recording conversations, people often challenge me on things, and then they stump me. And if you've watched my channel, you're probably just like cringing. You're like, John, please just say this, say that. Like, here's the answer. You missed out on a good opportunity. And I'm like, I apologize. I'm sorry. But here's my best attempt. I'm going to do my homework. And I also think this is a good opportunity because how many people who support Alberta independence have actually read this document? Like, I'm looking at it right here. And then people who are opposed to it as well. How many of you guys have read it? So for intellectual honesty, I'm going to push back as hard as I possibly can against this document. Whenever something stands out to me, I'm going to call it out. And I want you to leave your comments below. I also anticipate that this is going to take several episodes to get through. So I'm going to try to keep every episode to less than a half an hour. So to get started, guys, please like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoy this. So, The Value of Freedom, a draft fully costed fiscal plan for an independent Alberta. I guess I just want to say one more thing. I met Dennis Kelma. He's one of the principal authors of this document. Really intelligent guy. Thank you so much, Dennis, and everybody at the Alberta Prosperity Project for putting this together. Okay. So notice to the reader, this document is based on a wide variety of sources, including Statistics Canada, the province of Alberta, budgets, public documents, and accounting firms, and similar discussions on multiple forums. Particularly for historical numbers, these sources have been used jointly to provide a straightforward and understandable, reasonably accurate basis for calculations. When I was in university, I studied economics and accounting, and I had to write a lot of reports like this. And so I'm glad that he's already citing the sources. So right here, I just want to jump right down to where the sources start appearing. I was already looking at some of these sources on page 8, I think. Yeah, right here. So Statistics Canada, Fraser Institute, GST numbers from the CRA, Library of Parliament, Canada Revenue Agency, OECD Statistics Canada. So those are some of the sources that are mentioned in this document. And I just encourage anybody who wants to disagree with this, if your retort is just, I don't believe these numbers, they're too crazy, hey, you can look down below. I'm going to share the link to this document and you can look up these sources yourself. As such, the figures used in this plan are approximate and ought to be considered to be plus or minus 10%. Fair enough. This was explained to me why, because the sources that Statistics Canada uses might be a little bit different from the sources that the Library of Parliament uses. And this is actually why we have a lot of problems, because one politician will quote one source, another will quote the other source. So I think it's fair that they're including a plus or minus 10% range in the government public data that they're using. As they are frequently estimates, they will not balance to the penny, but are believed to be directionally robust and within accepted planning tolerances. It is important to note that the section dealing with the plan for Alberta's Indigenous nations is drafted with the utmost respect for the sovereign and Indigenous people of Alberta. And right there, this should shut down anybody who's calling us and saying that, Alberta independence is against Indigenous peoples. It's like, we actually want to bring everybody to the table on this one. There are 3 options that I see going forward here if Alberta independence happens. Option 1 is Indigenous peoples keep their treaties exactly the way they are, with the federal government, with the crown, and all that. Option 2 is they transfer to the Republic of Alberta, And there's historical precedent that this is possible because the treaties have already transferred directly from the English kingdom to the sovereign country of Canada. So these treaties are transferable. So to think that they could transfer to Republic of Alberta is totally believable. But then the third option, and I hope that that's what this document is going to argue, is that we can renegotiate everything. And this is the first time in history when we can have an agreement that isn't racist, that isn't based off of antiquated ideas. But anyway, I digress. I'm glad this is in there. It is in no way intended to replace or diminish treaty rights, which will be a required subject for discussion and negotiation in the context of the development of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Alberta. Commonwealth of Alberta. I like Republic better. But yeah, like this isn't negotiable. We have to, we're not going to start our new country by immediately breaking contracts and agreements. We're going to be a nation that respects business, and we want people to do business with us. And we're going to show that, hey, contracts are contracts, and we could renegotiate them, but we're not going to just dishonor them. Which could include a continued role for the Crown of Alberta in the context of any future constitutional agreements or arrangements. It is not the purpose of this document to in any way prejudge or predetermine the outcome of such constitutional negotiations, which will proceed with all due respect to the constitutionality protected treaty and Aboriginal rights of Alberta's Indigenous people and their ongoing relationship with the Crown. I say good. I'm glad they're bringing that up right on the first page. Throughout this document, we have tried to use conservative estimates based on historical actuals or current budgets. Okay. The authors believe that the share of the Canada Pension Plan owed to Alberta is, as the LifeWorks report states, namely $334 billion plus subsequent returns. Purely to make a conservative estimate, we have elected to use half that figure as the worst case for this draft plan. And, when I watch the news and I hear about this pension issue, I've heard this $34 billion number, and I've also heard it as low as like $100 billion, just based off of Alberta's only like 13 or 16% of the population. So that's like our cut. So maybe going with half is still a little bit higher. I guess the assumption here is that we're going to probably negotiate and get a slightly better deal than what the opposite would say, but we're finding a happy medium, I guess. I think that sounds fair and reasonable to presume that negotiations, calm heads would come together and figure this out. In all but the last section, towards a great economic future, we have deliberately avoided using greatly increased future revenues arising from the very positive effect of being able to fully exploit our natural resources. So that is interesting. A lot of people who are for Alberta independence were kind of assuming that, and I think reasonably so, that once we get independence, we're going to just open up our economy and start really just doing business. And what it sounds like is they're deliberately not assuming that. They're just going on, I guess, the projections that are available right now if we stayed in Canada. So, yeah, that sounds like a fair thing. If that argument holds true, then this is the worst case scenario, I guess. As a result, we take the view that the base document is the least positive case for an independent Alberta. Great. We believe that over time, a sovereign Alberta would become one of the lowest taxed and regulated nations in the world, rivaling jurisdictions similar to Dubai and Monaco. And this is what I find so exciting, right? People who live in Canada, live in Alberta, we don't know what it's like to live under, different laws in different countries, different situations, but there are other ways to live. We don't have to be this way. There are places in the world that have very low or zero income tax, for example. And, like Dubai, we could be the the Dubai with snow. Wouldn't that be awesome? Okay, so there's a place you can send feedback to, it looks like. And draft June 2025, great. So here's the table of contents. Revenue available to an independent Alberta using historical data. Okay, I'm not going to read every line there, you can see them. Estimated costs for replacement of federal services in an independent Alberta. Canada pension plan transfer to an Alberta pension plan. Okay, I like how they got all that laid out. RCMP funding and policing. Analysis for specific federal services and Alberta payments. Overview of an integrated Alberta independent financial landscape. Sustainability and the environment. Alberta's sovereign Indigenous people in an independent Alberta. I'm looking forward to that one. Okay. Immigration and deportation plan. I'm looking forward to that one because my wife is a permanent resident of Canada and she is not a Canadian citizen. And this is a big issue to me, as I'm sure it is to a lot of people. What are the economics supporting a future Alberta? Okay, so good. I look forward to all of those sections. This document is like 30-something pages long. Okay, introduction. The intention of this document is to provide clarity on the finances and key elements of an independent Alberta, compared to Alberta as a province in the Canadian Dominion. It seeks to answer the question, what is the tangible value of independence for Albertans? I came to the conclusion recently, and this is my personal opinion, and I think the vast majority of people will disagree on me with this, but I would vote for Alberta independence just because I value freedom. That is the only thing that would tip me over here. I just want rights that are guaranteed, that are inalienable. I've talked about this in many of my videos before, that Canadians don't have rights. We think we do. We think we have rights like the Americans do. But we actually don't. And, maybe a future video, I'm going to read the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and just explain that out too. But here what this is saying is they're going to explain the tangible value, right? We're not going to be a broke country as soon as we leave Canada. We're going to be economically prosperous to the envy of the entire world. So that's what this document's arguing. It presents a financial analysis for an independent Alberta focusing on the province's potential to retain 68 to 75 billion in annual federal tax contributions, establish an Alberta pension plan, replace federal services, and implement a robust environmental strategy. So it's very, it might push back on this number. You might say that these numbers that are coming up here are overestimated. But again, look at the documents, or look at the sources. Statistics Canada, that's where these numbers are coming from. So, all right. By directing some of the over contributions, 44 to 47 billion annually, Alberta could fund all critical services, reduce taxes, and invest in sustainability. That word sustainability, that gets overused a lot, but I'm in favor of this. Like, I want to live in a country that is economically prosperous, and I'm going to put in the word environmentally sustainable. I think we can definitely do that. The environmental strategy emphasizes leveraging Alberta's vast natural landscapes to mitigate concerns regarding carbon dioxide levels. Vast natural landscapes. Are we just saying that because we got a lot of trees, they're going to suck the carbon out of the air, so therefore we don't have to worry about our carbon footprint? Is that what that's saying? Look, I'm going to push back and just say that whenever we're talking about the environment, we can't just think that we live in a little bubble here, that, Alberta's borders, or any provinces or any country's borders, we live on a planet, so it affects us everywhere. These kind of problems aren't going to be solved just by one place. Okay. China and India and other places in the world, they're going to keep on polluting and they're going to keep on doing their thing. And who are we to think that we could stop them? But at the same time, how do we do this? Well, I believe that you take care of the things that you can. You take care of the things that are right in your backyard. Right? You take responsibility for your environmental impact. And you take responsibility for everything that you can in your little circle. And that's what I look forward to a Republic of Alberta is we're going to be a responsible country where, we take this stuff seriously, but we're also not looking to just have some globalist power that's going to tell us what to do. One size fits all. So you know what? Push back on this one because the environmental issue, I think, is a strong argument for or against. Maybe if we want to solve the problems, then let's bring on the globalists. They'll take away all our freedoms. We won't be able to drive anywhere or fly anywhere. You're going to be told to eat bugs. And that seems to be the solution that's being put forward to us. We're all going to have solar panels on our houses. I don't know. Leave a comment below. Continuing. Free from external climate agendas. This strategy prioritizes local environmental and economic goals, ensuring a sustainable, self-determined future for Alberta. I like that. Self-determined. Okay? Like, we're going to decide for ourselves. We don't need people from Ottawa. We don't need people from Davos coming over here and telling us what to do. We know what's best for ourselves, and we're going to take control of our future. This will completely eliminate all externally imposed limits on CO2 provision to Alberta's forests, prairies, grasslands, and farmlands. Good. All of this is in addition to the appeal of freeing ourselves from the restrictions placed on us by a confederation which no longer shares the values, culture, entrepreneurship, and desires which characterize Albertans. And right there, I've come to the conclusion that Canada is too big to be governed effectively. There are too many different values and cultures and desires, competing across Canada. Like, there's no way that a federal government can make us all happy. For example, let's say Alberta got our way on everything. We just got our way. We just got to dictate the terms and everybody listened. Quebec would be pissed off. Ontario would be pissed off. The Maritimes would probably get screwed, right? And so, you got to understand my thinking here. I don't want to do to them what they're doing to us, right? And so independence means we create a system that represents our values and our desires, and we protect our culture. These are the things that characterize Albertans. I love that. Okay, one could argue, and I love this line here. One could argue that even if the financial benefits were neutral, the appeal to independence and freedom to act is in itself compelling. And that's my argument right there. I just want freedom. But I'm glad that there's an economic document that outlines how prosperous we could be. Okay. Executive summary. An independent Alberta would reshape its fiscal and environmental landscape by retaining 68 to 75 billion in annual federal tax contributions, yielding a net gain of 44 to 47 billion dollars after accounting for 22 to 26 billion in federal transfers. Okay, so a net gain. So that's saying that day one, we're going to be $45 billion ahead. That's a lot of wiggle room for error. Even if that's half, the truth is Alberta is going to be just fine. So please argue with those numbers by looking up the stats and say that this is all wrong. Combined with provincial revenues of 74.1 billion and an Alberta pension plan generating 23.34 billion annually from a $183.7 billion asset base, total revenues reach $142.1 to $149.1 billion. So we're not broke, people. Now that talks about the expenditures. Expenditures, including $75.3 billion for provincial services and $22.7 to $31.6 billion to replace federal services, Example, defense, policing, Indigenous services total 98 to 106.9 billion, with one-time setup costs of 2.8 to 5.7 billion. It's like, what are these one-time setup costs? I wonder what that is, you know? I guess we got to pay to set up the new systems that we're going to have. So, okay, that makes sense. I wonder how they calculate that, though. This results in a fiscal surplus of $29.4 to $48.3 billion excluding setup, or $23.6 to $45.5 billion including setup, enabling significant tax reductions, infrastructure investment, and debt reduction. So right there, tax reductions. That is the one thing that I think most people should find appealing. You know, people like me, we just want freedom because we value freedom. But tax reductions, that's what we're talking about here, right? Paying less taxes. Who wouldn't want that? I guess there are some people who actually want to pay more taxes. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what taxes you'd want to pay. Maybe we should increase a few of them. They're not high enough. Anyway, tax reductions could include eliminating GST and provincial corporate income taxes. Wow. Reducing average annual total tax load by 29% from the current annual tax load of $38,000 average of all forms of taxation payments, personal income tax, corporate income tax, excise, GST, EIE, CPP, reduced to $26,000 per taxpayer. Or, okay, so here's another option, eliminating federal personal income tax and corporate income tax, cutting taxes by 46%, reducing average personal taxes by $18,000 to an average of $20,000. So it looks like they're giving us two options here, and see what, you know, the point of that is. I guess there's kind of a best case and worst case, like how much socialism do we want to have? Maybe, you know, I'm thinking about like the teachers unions, for example. They went on strike for a bunch of reasons, but one of them is they want more money. Obviously, everybody wants more money. Okay, well, here's a way you can get more money. Okay, we're still going to need teachers in an independent Republic of Alberta, which means you're still going to have a job, except you're going to be paying way less tax. Paying less tax is like getting a huge raise. Imagine what that's going to do to you. Right? Everybody's going to share in that. Whether you're part of a government union or whether you're a private sector, like everybody's going to benefit from this. Alberta's resource wealth and policy autonomy enable a sustainable, economically robust future, prioritizing local environmental needs over any other irrelevant policy inputs. I want to know what these irrelevant policy inputs are specifically. And, you know, whenever I'm always skeptical when I see that there's like, we're talking about environmental, even on my own side, right? Because I think a lot of it's just kind of wishful thinking. I don't know how I feel about this, right? But I'm glad they're talking about environmental stuff. Okay, back up to here. What happens if Alberta grows aggressively? All right. The final section speculatively examines the financial impact of an aggressive growth strategy for an independent Alberta. It considers removal of restrictive regulations to foster foreign and domestic investment, delivering substantial benefits to citizens, support municipalities, and ensure long-term fiscal stability. Lots of big words there. All right. We're going to cut regulations. We're going to invest more. And we're going to deliver all the services. Okay. Under this plan, oil is projected to grow from 3.8 million barrels per day in 2023 to 9.5 million in 2045. Natural gas from 11 billion cubic feet per day to 21 billion cubic feet per day. Interesting. So this document is assuming that once we cut the regulations, we're going to have a massive oil boom. And I'm a little bit skeptical here. I just want to be honest, because it was previously saying that we're not going to take that kind of approach, just be overly optimistic. So this does sound pretty optimistic. I don't want to say it's impossible. And I want to push back a little bit here too. I heard an interesting argument that, in 2010, we had 500 rigs drilling in Alberta during the month of January. And today we have like 150. So that's a huge decrease amount of jobs. Each drilling rig represents thousands of jobs. And a lot of those people over the last 10 years just got discouraged and went back to wherever they came from, but a lot of them, especially the more technical people, the geologists and the engineers and the people who have the real human capital to develop oil and gas projects, they were all scooped up by international oil companies. They went overseas. I know people who are working in different places around the world and living in Costa Rica 1 month on, 1 month off, right? Or Thailand, places like that. I don't think we're ever going to get them back. And the argument is kind of compelling because in order for us to have this kind of a boom in the oil and gas industry, we need human capital. We need the people who have the technical expertise. So how are we going to lure them back? That's the best pushback I could say to this. But at the same time, I think there are still enough smart people in Alberta that we're going to figure it out. So I push back on my own argument there. But okay, continuing. Direct revenue could rise from $144 billion in 2025 to $334 billion by 2045. And savings from deregulation savings contribute to a total economic impact of $8.2 trillion, including 300,000 to 450,000 new jobs. So is direct revenue, is that like oil and gas royalties? Is that what that means? I think that's what that means, right? So that's a huge assumption. I want to see. I'm excited to read how they come to that conclusion. The fiscal framework that is suggested eliminates personal income tax, reduces corporate income tax to 10%, and introduces a 5% Alberta sales tax. Did you know that? So there's a proposal to have a 5%. So we get rid of the GST. I think that's what AST means, right? AST means Alberta sales tax. But then we replace it with something else. We get rid of GST, replace it with something else that's already familiar to us. So we'll see how that one goes over. But a sales tax okay. In a sense, it's a more fair tax than an income tax because it's the people who pay it are the people who can pay it, right? And you pay proportionally. So if you are buying stuff, then presumably you can pay for it. And if you don't want to pay the tax, then you just buy less stuff, which has a chilling effect on the economy as well because it kind of stops people from buying stuff. So it is a sustainable way to fund things, though, I guess. I don't know. We need to have some taxes. That's interesting that they're proposing this. Also replacing property taxes with a frontage and per hectare fee, municipal residence fee, and using provincial grants to ensure continued funding for essential services like roads, schools, and public safety. One other thing, I've heard this many times that this document and other documents, like there's a constitution that's being written up, like a draft, over the next summer, over the next 6 months, until the election or till the referendum. People need to start pushing back. We need to start putting our ideas out and arguing about it, hashing it out. Because after a successful referendum, when we have a majority of Albertans voting to leave, there's going to be a constitutional conference, and all of these things are going to be up for discussion. So educate yourself and start thinking about it. Do we want, do you want to get rid of property taxes, but then just have like a frontage per hectare fee? Sounds like the same thing. Anyway, okay. Obviously we need to pay taxes, but how are we going to, what taxes are we going to find acceptable and how much? And is just a big cut going to be worth it? I think so. The suite of options is used as an example, there being many other options, including balancing reductions of income tax against elimination of property taxes to better protect property rights, as well as potentially lower levels of GST. Citizen-focused policies include reducing post-secondary tuition, providing free pharmacare and dental coverage for 1.5 million children, low-income households and retirees, and investing in future capital for technology, advanced manufacturing, and agriculture to diversify the economy. There's a lot of people in this Alberta independence movement who are libertarian in their thinking, myself included. I'm closer to libertarianism, but I do like some socialism. But I wonder how this is going to go over, right? Free pharmacare, free dental coverage for 1.5 million children. Like, I don't want people to get left behind, and I want to help people who are in need. Like, let's do this. At the same time, I don't want a state full of dependent people who are they're completely dependent on the government. I do like the idea of pushing, people having to take responsibility for themselves. So leave a comment there. Like, how much socialism do you want in the new republic? I might be an outlier when I say that I'm skeptical about this, because I think a lot of Albertans probably do want something like this. But at the same time, it's got to get paid for somehow. And it's not wise to pay for it with royalties. Okay, royalties come from oil and gas sales. It's a one-time payment. It's much better to fund it with, an income tax or a sales tax or property taxes. Those are like sustainable and predictable. You can make a reliable budget off of that. If you try to base a budget off of royalties, you're always subject to the whims of international markets. So it's more like we should save our royalties, put it in a bank account, and then use the interest from our royalties as a way to fund our government. That's another way to do this. So you can have more and more socialism over time, I suppose, if you grow here's the next thing, the Heritage Fund. The Heritage Fund can be seen to grow from 1.3 to 1.4 trillion by 2045, with a 4% real return generating 52 to 56 billion annually for future stability. So I'm glad they're talking about that, because, man, if we could have just a big chunk of money sitting in the bank account that's like propping up our economy during the ups and downs, and then in the very long future, once the world doesn't need oil and gas, maybe, let's say, we got that sitting there. Okay. Anyway, that's as far as I'm going to go. I see that I'm over the half an hour mark now. The second episode, I'm going to pick up right where I left off here, talking about revenue available to an independent Alberta using historical data. But if you like what I'm doing here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video. I appreciate you watching. And I'm going to try to reply to as many comments as I possibly can. Cheers.